Arthur Penhaligon was, to all outward appearances, the quintessential suburbanite. Khaki shorts, meticulously trimmed lawn, a wife named Susan who coordinated potlucks with military precision, the whole 9 yards. But behind the neatly painted fence and the perfectly aligned rose bushes lay a secret obsession, his pool. It wasn't just a pool, it was an aquatic masterpiece. Arthur spent countless hours skimming, vacuuming, and balancing the chemicals to achieve a level of crystalline perfection that bordered on the divine. He'd even installed underwater lighting that shifted subtly through a spectrum of calming blues and greens. For Arthur, his pool was more than just water, it was a sanctuary, a testament to his dedication and, frankly, his only real joy in life. The tranquility of Arthur's perfectly balanced ecosystem was shattered on a Tuesday. A crisp, officious letter arrived from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Its carefully worded pronouncements, filled with phrases like enhanced community engagement and optimized resource allocation, danced around the central point: all privately owned pools were now, by decree, considered community property. The justification, buried deep within the legalese, was to promote equitable access to recreational amenities and foster a stronger sense of neighborhood unity. Arthur read it twice, then a third time, a vein throbbing in his temple. Community property? This wasn't some communal garden, this was his pool. The thought of neighborhood kids cannonballing into his meticulously crafted oasis filled him with a cold dread. Arthur initially approached the situation with measured diplomacy. He fired off polite but pointed emails to the HOA board detailing the exact cost of the pool's construction, the ongoing maintenance expenses, and the sheer man-hours he'd invested in its upkeep. He followed up with carefully worded letters citing property rights and the lack of any prior notification. He even braved the monthly HOA meeting, a sterile environment of beige walls and passive-aggressive sighs, to present his case in person. He spoke calmly, rationally, emphasizing that his pool was not a resource, but a personal investment. His efforts, however, were met with blank stares, bureaucratic jargon, and the unwavering conviction that community needs outweigh individual preferences. The futility of his appeals began to gnaw at him. The frustration reached a boiling point when the HOA announced the community swim schedule. Glued to Arthur's gate was a laminated sheet detailing designated swim times for various neighborhood groups. Toddler time Tuesdays, senior splash Saturdays, and most horrifyingly, teen takeover Thursdays. The first community swim arrived with the force of a summer storm. Shrieking children, inflatable unicorns, and a cacophony of splashing shattered the serene atmosphere he had so carefully cultivated. Arthur watched from his kitchen window, a mixture of disbelief and incandescent rage simmering within him as a rogue water balloon splattered against the glass. His sanctuary was under siege. Arthur, ever the pragmatist, initially opted for subtle sabotage. He meticulously adjusted the pool's pH balance, creating a slight, almost imperceptible skin irritation that left swimmers subtly uncomfortable. Then came the chlorine surge, just enough to turn blonde hair a delightful shade of green. And finally, the strategically placed inflatable sharks, not menacing enough to clear the pool, but unsettling enough to keep the less brave swimmers clinging to the shallow end. These were minor acts of defiance, pinpricks of rebellion against the HOA's tyranny. They brought Arthur a small measure of satisfaction, a tiny victory in what was quickly becoming an all-out war. The turning point arrived on a sweltering Saturday afternoon. Arthur returned from a grocery run to find his backyard transformed into a teenage wasteland. Empty pizza boxes littered the patio, music blared from a portable speaker, and a gaggle of unsupervised teenagers splashed raucously in his pool. But the final straw, the insult that truly broke the camel's back, or, in this case, the swan's neck, was the sight of his prized inflatable swan, Penelope, lying deflated and shredded on the pool deck. It was then, amidst the chaos and the carnage, that Arthur realized subtle sabotage was no longer sufficient. The gloves had to come off. Arthur's mind, once focused on chlorine levels and algae blooms, now swirled with images of sharp teeth and murky waters. He spent hours hunched over his computer, researching exotic pet ownership laws, poring over legal precedents regarding aquarium regulations versus the outright ban on dangerous animals. He discovered a loophole, a fine distinction between owning piranhas as aquarium specimens and possessing them as exotic pets. Satisfied, he made contact with a discreet exotic animal dealer, a shadowy figure known only as the Fish Whisperer, who promised delivery of a school of red-bellied piranhas, no questions asked. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but Arthur was past the point of reason. Under the cloak of a moonless night, Arthur executed his plan. The fish whisperer had delivered the piranhas in oxygenated bags, their beady eyes glinting in the dim light of Arthur's flashlight. One by one, Arthur carefully acclimated the piranhas to the pool water, a macabre ritual performed with the precision of a seasoned scientist. He imagined the scene that would unfold the next day, a twisted sense of satisfaction washing over him. As the last piranha slipped into the water, Arthur whispered, "Welcome home," a chilling greeting to his new aquatic enforcers. The next morning started innocently enough. Mrs. Henderson, eager for her aqua aerobics hour, was the first to brave the community pool. Initially, there was confusion. A strange shimmering in the water, a flash of red. Then, a piercing scream ripped through the suburban silence. Other swimmers, drawn by the commotion, peered into the water, their faces slowly contorting from curiosity to horror. The splashing escalated into a frantic scramble as the truth dawned on them. Arthur's pool was no longer a community amenity, it was a feeding frenzy waiting to happen. Chaos erupted within the Willow Creek HOA. Emergency meetings were called, accusations flew, and fingers pointed with the force of a Category 5 hurricane. The HOA president, a perpetually flustered woman named Mildred McMillan, frantically dialed exterminators, animal control, and even the local zoo, none of whom were equipped to handle a piranha infestation. A hastily assembled team of volunteers, armed with butterfly nets and sheer terror, attempted to drain the pool and capture the elusive predators. The scene resembled a slapstick comedy, only with the very real threat of flesh-eating fish lurking beneath the surface. Amidst the pandemonium, Arthur emerged as a beacon of calm concern. He approached Mildred McMillan, his face etched with worry, and expressed his profound shock and concern about the sudden appearance of dangerous wildlife in the community pool. He offered his full cooperation in the investigation, subtly reminding Mildred that the pool was, after all, now community property, implying the HOA was ultimately responsible. His performance was Oscar-worthy, a carefully crafted display of plausible deniability that left even the most suspicious neighbors scratching their heads. How could mild-mannered Arthur be behind such a thing? But beneath the surface of the mild-mannered suburbanite lurked something more. A glint of something sharp in his eye, a certain confidence in handling the piranhas that belied his supposed inexperience. Susan, his wife, often remarked that Arthur had a knack for getting things done, a euphemism that hinted at a past she didn't entirely understand. Had he worked with animals before? Was there a previous, less-than-legal, venture tucked away in his past? Perhaps a stint as a wildlife handler, or maybe even a brief foray into the exotic animal trade. The piranha incident wasn't just an act of suburban rebellion, it was a glimpse into a hidden side of Arthur Penhaligon. Willow Creek, once a haven of suburban anonymity, was now ground zero for a media-feeding frenzy. News fans lined the streets, satellite trucks sprouted like metallic mushrooms, and reporters swarmed the neighborhood, thrusting microphones into the faces of bewildered residents. "Piranha pool panic grips suburbia," screamed the headlines. TV anchors gleefully recounted the tale of the HOA gone wrong, interspersing footage of the frantic pool draining with interviews of shaken neighbors, each offering their own colorful and often contradictory account of the events. Arthur, of course, remained an elusive figure, a ghost in the machine of the unfolding media circus. The media attention forced the HOA's hand. They lawyered up, and Arthur, in turn, sought legal representation. He found Ms. Evelyn Sterling, a sharp-tongued attorney with a reputation for taking on seemingly impossible cases. Evelyn argued that the HOA's declaration was an overreach of power, citing the ambiguous wording and the lack of due process. She emphasized that Arthur's pool was privately funded and maintained, and that the HOA's actions constituted a blatant violation of his property rights. The stage was set for a legal showdown, a battle between suburban bureaucracy and one man's love for his pool. The courtroom became a battleground for scientific debate. Marine biologists were called to the stand, offering conflicting testimony on the piranha's survivability in a chlorinated environment. One expert argued that the chemicals would quickly decimate the fish, rendering them harmless. Another countered that piranhas were surprisingly resilient and could adapt to a wide range of water conditions. The debate then shifted to the potential ecological impact, with concerns raised about the piranhas escaping into local waterways and wreaking havoc on the ecosystem. The trial had become less about property rights and more about the potential for a suburban apocalypse. Just when it seemed the trial would drag on indefinitely, a bombshell dropped. A former neighbor, disgruntled with the HOA, came forward with evidence of a long-standing feud between Arthur and Mildred McMillan, the HOA president. Years ago, Arthur had won a property line dispute, preventing Mildred from building an extension onto her house. The witness testified that Mildred had harbored a grudge ever since, vowing to make Arthur's life a living hell. This revelation cast a new light on the HOA's actions, suggesting a personal vendetta fueled the community property declaration. The revelation of Mildred's vendetta sparked a dramatic shift in public opinion. Arthur, once viewed with suspicion, was now hailed as a folk hero, a symbol of the little guy fighting back against bureaucratic tyranny. Online petitions demanding the HOA's dissolution circulated, and Arthur received an outpouring of support from homeowners across the country who had faced similar battles with overzealous HOAs. He was no longer just fighting for his pool, he was fighting for the rights of every frustrated homeowner trapped in the clutches of suburban governance. Faced with mounting legal fees and a tidal wave of public outrage, the HOA blinked. They offered Arthur a settlement, a formal apology for the misunderstanding regarding the pool, a legally binding guarantee of his exclusive ownership, and a promise to cover all his legal expenses. It seemed like a complete victory. Evelyn Sterling, ever pragmatic, advised Arthur to accept the offer and put the whole ordeal behind him. But Arthur, emboldened by his newfound status as a champion of the people, had other ideas. Arthur, channeling his inner revolutionary, presented a counteroffer that stunned both the HOA and Evelyn Sterling. He demanded not only the unequivocal guarantee of his pool rights but also sweeping reforms to the HOA's governance, including a transparency clause that would open all board meetings and financial records to public scrutiny. He insisted on term limits for board members and a formal process for addressing homeowner grievances. It was a complete overhaul of the HOA system, a bold attempt to democratize suburban governance, all fueled by a piranha-infested pool. The world watched as Arthur, now a bona fide celebrity, carefully netted the piranhas, one by one, from his pool. The scene was surreal. News cameras zoomed in on his gentle handling of the once feared creatures, his touch almost reverent. He had arranged for their relocation to a reputable aquarium, a sanctuary where they would be properly cared for and admired, not just feared. It was a symbolic act, a demonstration that even the most extreme measures could be followed by compassion and responsibility. The piranhas, once instruments of chaos, were now ambassadors of change. With gritted teeth and thinly veiled resentment, the HOA accepted Arthur's counteroffer. The reforms were implemented, albeit reluctantly, ushering in a new era of transparency and accountability in Willow Creek. Mildred McMillan, her reputation tarnished and her power diminished, quietly resigned from her position. Arthur, the seemingly ordinary suburbanite, had become an unlikely champion for homeowners' rights, a symbol of resistance against the often absurd tyranny of suburban governance. His name was whispered with a mixture of admiration and fear at HOA meetings across the nation. The dust settled, the news crews departed, and Willow Creek slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Arthur, however, was forever changed. He spent his days lounging by his pool, now definitively his, a quiet smile playing on his lips. He had not only reclaimed his sanctuary but had also discovered a newfound appreciation for the power of unexpected tactics. He knew now that sometimes the most absurd solutions were the most effective and that even a mild-mannered suburbanite could spark a revolution, one piranha at a time. But Arthur's revolutionary spirit hadn't been entirely quenched. A new battle was brewing on the horizon. A mischievous glint returned to his eye as he gazed across his meticulously manicured lawn, then at his neighbor's, which was a shade or two greener, a violation of the HOA's notoriously strict lawn maintenance rules. Perhaps a strategically placed herd of goats? Or maybe a flamboyant display of wildflowers, defying the HOA's demand for uniform Kentucky bluegrass. The possibilities, he realized, were endless. The HOA may have won the pool battle, but the war for suburban freedom was far from over. A question lingers, a subtle undercurrent beneath the triumphant narrative. Did Arthur really have no idea how the piranhas got into his pool? Was his performance of shocked innocence truly genuine, or was it a meticulously crafted act, a calculated maneuver in a grand scheme of suburban rebellion? The speed with which he researched legal loopholes, his connection to the fish whisperer, his uncanny ability to handle the piranhas all suggest a level of pre-planning that belies his seemingly mild-mannered persona. Perhaps the piranha incident wasn't a spontaneous act of revenge, but a carefully orchestrated operation years in the making. The camera pans out, capturing the tranquil scene. Arthur, reclined on a deck chair beside his shimmering pool, is the picture of suburban contentment. The underwater lights shift through their calming blues and greens. A faint, almost imperceptible smile plays on his lips, a subtle acknowledgement of the chaos he unleashed, the revolution he sparked. He's the master of his domain, the unlikely hero who dared to fight back against the tyranny of the HOA, armed with nothing but a dream and a school of flesh-eating fish. The story ends, but the legend of Arthur Penhaligon lives on.